I knew I was going to regret buying a house in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, but the place was perfect and the price was right, so I convinced myself it would be fine. My name is Victor Vaughn, and I am a mechanical engineer who works from home 3 days a week, which means I have plenty of time to observe the petty tyranny that passes for community governance in Greenfield Meadows, a subdivision in northern Wisconsin, just outside of Green Bay. The snow here starts falling in November and doesn't really stop until April, and when you live on a private road that the city doesn't plow, you learn real quick that snow removal isn't optional. When I moved into my house 2 years ago, I noticed something interesting about the layout of our street. My property sits at the very beginning of Pinecone Drive, right where it branches off from the main county road. Behind me are 7 other houses, all occupied by families who joined the HOA with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for cult members. The way the road curves meant that anyone living past my house had to drive by my property to get in or out. It was just geography, nothing special, until it became the most important fact of my entire winter. I had always been the helpful type. My dad raised me to believe that good neighbors look out for each other. So when I bought my commercial-grade snowblower, a beast of a machine that could clear a 2-car driveway in under 10 minutes, I didn't just use it for my own property. Every time it snowed more than a few inches, I would get up early, fire up that beautiful machine, and clear the entire length of Pinecone Drive from my house all the way to the cul-de-sac at the end where the HOA president lived. It took me about an hour and a half, but I didn't mind. I liked the exercise, I liked the fresh air, and I liked knowing that my neighbors could get to work on time. For the first year and a half, everything was great. People would wave when they drove past, leave thank-you notes in my mailbox, and one guy even dropped off a bottle of bourbon at Christmas. I thought I had lucked into a decent community, despite the HOA thing. Then Patricia Pemberton got elected as the new HOA president, and my life turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says the words HOA president. She was a woman in her late 40s with that specific haircut that seems to be issued along with the title, the kind where the back is shorter than the front, and the whole thing is aggressively blonde. She wore fleece vests over floral blouses even in the dead of winter, and she had perfected the art of smiling while saying the most condescending things imaginable. She lived in the largest house at the end of Pinecone Drive with her husband Gerald, who I had never heard speak a single word, and their 2 teenage children who looked permanently embarrassed to be related to her. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in January. I had woken up at 6 to find 8 inches of fresh powder blanketing everything, so I bundled up, grabbed my coffee, and headed out to the garage. My snowblower was a Honda HSS 1332 ATD, top of the line, with a powerful engine and a clearing width that made quick work of even the deepest snow. Yes, it was loud. It was a machine designed for serious snow removal, not a quiet electric toy that would die halfway through the job. But it wasn't any louder than a lawnmower, and I had never run it before 7 in the morning or after 8 at night. I was about halfway through clearing the road, working my way past the Henderson house, when I saw Patricia marching down her driveway in her bathrobe and snow boots. Her face was the color of a ripe tomato, and she was waving her arms over her head like she was trying to signal a rescue helicopter. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence made my ears ring. "Victor," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we need to have a little chat about your snow removal activities." I pulled off my gloves and took a sip of my now cold coffee. "Good morning to you too, Patricia. What seems to be the problem?" "The problem," she said, dropping all pretense of politeness, "is that you have been disturbing the peace and quiet of our neighborhood with that monstrosity." She gestured at my snowblower like it was an offensive weapon. I looked at my watch. It was 7:15. "I'm clearing the road so everyone can get to work. I thought people would appreciate it." "Appreciate it," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're violating noise ordinances and creating a public nuisance. I've received multiple complaints from concerned residents." This was news to me. "Who complained?" "That's confidential HOA business," she snapped. "The point is that effective immediately, you need to cease using that machine during morning hours. If you insist on clearing snow, you'll need to do it by hand or with a quieter device." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Patricia, it's January in Wisconsin. We get lake-effect snow almost every day. You want me to shovel a quarter-mile of road by hand?" "I want you to be considerate of your neighbors," she said primly. "Now I have to get ready for work. We'll be discussing this at the next HOA meeting." She turned and marched back toward her house, her boots squeaking in the snow. I stood there for a moment, watching her retreat, then fired up the snowblower and finished the job. If she wanted to have a discussion, fine. But I wasn't going to leave everyone stranded because Patricia had decided she didn't like the sound of my engine. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at 7. They were always held in Patricia's living room, which I found weirdly informal for an organization that took itself so seriously. I had never attended one before, having better things to do with my Thursday nights, but this time I made an exception. I wanted to hear these supposed complaints for myself. When I arrived, the usual suspects were already there. There was Margaret Wilson, the secretary, a mousy woman in her 60s who seemed to exist solely to agree with everything Patricia said. Tom Henderson and his wife Julie were there, sitting on the couch and looking uncomfortable. The Chens, David and Susan, had claimed 2 chairs near the fireplace. Paul Rodriguez, who lived 3 houses down from me, gave me a nod when I walked in. And of course, Patricia was holding court from her position in the big armchair that might as well have been a throne. "Wonderful, Victor decided to join us," Patricia announced as I took a seat on a folding chair someone had set up near the door. "Let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, shall we?" I crossed my arms and waited. Patricia pulled out a folder and made a show of opening it. "We have received multiple noise complaints regarding your early morning snow removal activities. The HOA bylaws clearly state that residents must maintain peace and quiet during designated hours, which include before 8 in the morning on weekdays." "I've read the bylaws," I said calmly. "That section refers to construction and renovation work, not snow removal. And the county noise ordinance allows for lawn equipment between 7 and 9. Patricia's smile tightened. "The spirit of the rule is to prevent disturbances. Your snowblower is excessively loud and disruptive. Can I hear from the people who actually complained?" I asked, looking around the room, because I've been clearing that road for over a year and this is the first I'm hearing about any issues. There was an uncomfortable silence. Tom Henderson studied his shoes. Susan Chen suddenly found her phone fascinating. Nobody met my eyes except Paul Rodriguez, who looked as confused as I felt. The complaints were submitted confidentially. Margaret Wilson piped up in her thin voice. "It's HOA policy to protect the privacy of concerned residents." "That's convenient," I said. "So Patricia tells me there are complaints, but nobody has to actually own up to making them. How do I even know they're real?" Patricia's face went red. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm saying I'd like some transparency. If people have a problem with me helping clear the road, they should tell me directly instead of hiding behind anonymous complaints." "This isn't a debate," Patricia said, her voice sharp. "The HOA board has made a decision. You are hereby ordered to cease using your gas-powered snowblower between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Failure to comply will result in fines as outlined in Section 12 of the bylaws. $50 for the first offense, doubling for each subsequent violation." I felt my jaw clench. "And what about clearing the road? Are you going to arrange for a plow service?" "The road maintenance is the responsibility of individual homeowners," Patricia said smoothly. "If you choose to clear the road, you must do so in compliance with HOA rules." Now, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. I sat through the rest of the meeting in stunned silence while they debated the crucial issues of holiday decoration guidelines and whether the Chens should be allowed to paint their front door navy blue instead of the approved slate gray. When it finally ended, I headed straight for Paul Rodriguez in the driveway. "Did you complain about my snowblower?" I asked him directly. He looked offended. "Hell no, man. I love that you clear the road. My wife has to be at the hospital by 7 for her shifts. You've saved our butts more times than I can count. What about the Hendersons or the Chens?" "I seriously doubt it," Paul said, shaking his head. "Everyone I've talked to thinks you're doing us a huge favor. This is Patricia being Patricia. She's been on a power trip ever since she got elected. Last month she tried to fine the Johnsons because their lawn was a quarter-inch too tall." I drove home feeling a mixture of anger and frustration. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that there had never been any real complaints. Patricia just wanted to flex her authority, and I had made the mistake of being an easy target. The next morning, it snowed again. 6 inches of heavy, wet snow that made the roads treacherous. I looked out my window at 6:30 and saw my snowblower sitting in the garage. Then I looked at the clock. It wasn't 8 yet. According to Patricia's new rule, I couldn't touch the machine for another 90 minutes, so I didn't. I made myself breakfast, did some work, answered emails, and at exactly 8 o'clock I went out and cleared my driveway and the section of road directly in front of my house. Then I put the snowblower away and went back inside. The rest of Pinecone Drive remained buried under 6 inches of snow. My phone started ringing around 8:30. First it was Tom Henderson, asking if I was okay and if my snowblower was broken. I told him I was fine and that I was just complying with the new HOA rules. There was a long pause, then he thanked me and hung up. Then Susan Chen called with the same question and got the same answer. By 9 o'clock, I had received calls or texts from every household on Pinecone Drive except Patricia's. The messages were all variations on the same theme. They couldn't get their cars out. They were going to be late for work. Could I please help them out just this once? I responded to each one politely but firmly. I would be happy to help, but the HOA had forbidden me from using my snowblower before 8, and by the time I could legally start, I had to begin my workday. If they had concerns, they should take it up with the HOA president. Around 10, Patricia called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Victor, what exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded without preamble. "I'm working," I said pleasantly. "I'm on a conference call actually, so I'll need to keep this brief. The road is impassable. People couldn't get to work this morning. I'm aware. That's unfortunate. You need to clear the road immediately." "I'd love to help, Patricia, but I'm not allowed to use my snowblower before 8, remember? And after 8 I have work commitments. I'm sure everyone can just leave a little earlier tomorrow or maybe shovel the road themselves." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was glacial. "You're doing this on purpose. I'm following the rules you created. Isn't that what good HOA members are supposed to do? Now, if you'll excuse me, my meeting is starting. I hung up before she could respond. The satisfaction I felt was probably petty, but I didn't care. Patricia had created this situation. She could deal with the consequences. That evening, I received a formal letter in my mailbox, delivered by hand. It was from the HOA board, informing me that failure to maintain the shared road could result in fines and potential legal action. I read it twice, then did something I had been putting off for months. I pulled out my property deed and the HOA bylaws and read through both documents cover to cover. What I found was interesting. The HOA bylaws stated that shared roads were the responsibility of all residents equally. There was nothing that assigned specific maintenance duties to anyone. More importantly, my deed included an easement that gave me the right to access the county road via Pinecone Drive, but nowhere did it obligate me to maintain that road for others. I had been doing it out of courtesy, not obligation. I called a lawyer the next morning, a real estate attorney named Michelle Harper, who had helped me with my house purchase. I explained the situation and asked her to review the documents. She called me back 3 hours later, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. "You're not legally required to clear that road," she confirmed. "The HOA bylaws are vague, probably intentionally so, but they don't create any specific duty for you. You've been doing it voluntarily, which means you can stop voluntarily." What about their threat of fines? They can try, but they won't have any legal basis. The only thing the bylaws are clear about is that residents can't create hazards or nuisances. Not clearing snow doesn't fall under that category, especially since you're not preventing anyone from clearing it themselves. So I can just stop. You can absolutely just stop. In fact, if they try to fine you, let me know. I'd be happy to send them a letter explaining why they're wrong. Won't even charge you for it. These HOA power trip cases drive me crazy. I thanked her and hung up, feeling significantly better about my decision. If Patricia wanted to play games, I was ready. It snowed again that weekend, a big storm that dumped 14 inches of heavy snow over 2 days. It was the kind of snow that required serious equipment to move, not shovels or small electric machines. I spent Saturday clearing my driveway and building a snowman with the neighbor kids who lived on the county road. I waved cheerfully at the cars that couldn't make it up Pinecone Drive and had to turn around. By Sunday afternoon, the situation had apparently become critical. Paul Rodriguez showed up at my door looking desperate. His wife had been stuck at home for 2 days, missing a shift at the hospital, and they needed to get out for groceries. "I know this is awkward," he said, stamping snow off his boots on my porch. "But is there any way you could clear just enough for us to get through? I'll pay you, whatever you want." I felt bad for Paul. He had always been a good neighbor, and his wife was a pediatric nurse who did important work. But I also knew that the moment I cleared the road for one person, Patricia would claim I was required to do it for everyone. "I wish I could help," I told him honestly. "But the HOA made it clear that my snowblower is too disruptive. If I use it, they'll fine me." "You should call Patricia and ask her to organize a group effort to clear the road, or maybe hire a plow service." "We've been trying," Paul said, his frustration evident. "She keeps saying it's not the HOA's responsibility, and that you've been voluntarily maintaining the road, so you should just continue." Then I guess she should have thought about that before she banned my equipment. Paul left looking defeated, and I felt like a jerk, but I also knew I was in the right. This wasn't my problem to solve. It was Patricia's. Monday morning brought more phone calls. Tom Henderson called to tell me that his company was threatening to write him up for missing work. Susan Chen called crying because she had a dental emergency and couldn't get out to see her dentist. Even Margaret Wilson called, her voice tight and angry, insisting that I had a moral obligation to help my neighbors. Then maybe the HOA should revoke the noise restriction, I suggested. I'd be happy to clear the road if I'm allowed to use my equipment. The rules are the rules, Victor. You don't get to pick and choose which ones to follow. Exactly my point, I said, and ended the call. By Monday afternoon, Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. I received a text message informing me that my attendance was mandatory and that failure to appear would result in an automatic fine. I showed up at 7 o'clock to find every resident of Pinecone Drive crammed into Patricia's living room, and not one of them looked happy. Patricia called the meeting to order with her usual self-importance, but I could see the cracks in her composure. Her hair wasn't as perfectly styled as usual, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "We're here to discuss the snow removal situation," she announced. "As you all know, our road has been impassable for several days due to Victor's refusal to maintain it. Due to the HOA's noise restrictions," I corrected. "I'm not refusing to do anything. I'm following your rules." "You're being deliberately obstructive," Patricia snapped. "You know perfectly well that the road needs to be cleared. So clear it," I said simply. "You have a snowblower. So do the Hendersons and the Johnsons. Nothing is stopping any of you from clearing the road yourselves." Tom Henderson spoke up. "Victor, come on. Your machine can do in an hour what would take the rest of us all day. You've always cleared the road before. Why stop now?" Because apparently I was disturbing the peace. Patricia made it very clear that my snowblower is too loud and that using it violates HOA policy. "I'm just being a good neighbor and respecting those concerns." "This is ridiculous," Susan Chen said. "Patricia, can't you just waive the noise rule for snow removal?" Patricia's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "The rules exist for a reason. We can't just ignore them whenever they become inconvenient." "But they're your rules," Paul Rodriguez pointed out. "You're the one who implemented the noise restriction. You can change it." "The board implemented it," Patricia corrected. "It wasn't just me." All eyes turned to Margaret Wilson, the only other board member present. She squirmed in her seat. Well, Patricia felt strongly about it, and I agreed that noise pollution is a valid concern. "Did anyone actually complain about Victor's snowblower?" Paul demanded. "Because I've asked around, and nobody seems to know anything about these mysterious complaints." The room went silent. Patricia's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. "The complaints were confidential," she finally said. "That's not an answer," Tom Henderson said. He turned to look at me. "Victor, if the HOA lifts the noise restriction, will you go back to clearing the road?" I thought about it for a moment. The petty part of me wanted to say no, wanted to make them all suffer for Patricia's overreach. But these were my neighbors, people I had to live with, and most of them had done nothing wrong. If the board officially rescinds the noise restriction and puts it in writing, then yes, I'll continue maintaining the road like I always have. "Fine," Patricia said through gritted teeth. "The board will take the matter under advisement." "Not good enough," Paul said. "We need a decision now. We've all missed work. Some of us have missed important appointments. This needs to be resolved tonight." There was a chorus of agreement from the other residents. Patricia looked cornered, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape route. Finally, she turned to Margaret. "Do we have a motion to temporarily suspend the noise restriction as it applies to snow removal equipment?" Margaret nodded quickly. "I'll motion that." "All in favor?" Patricia asked, her voice flat. Every hand in the room went up except Patricia's. She stared at the forest of raised hands for a long moment, then sighed. "The motion carries." Victor, you're authorized to use your snowblower for road maintenance purposes. Are we done here? Put it in writing, I said. Official HOA letterhead, signed by both board members. I'll need it before I clear anything. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but the hostile stares from her neighbors apparently convinced her otherwise. She went to her office and returned 5 minutes later with a printed letter stating that the noise restrictions did not apply to necessary snow removal activities. Both she and Margaret signed it, and Patricia shoved it at me with enough force that it crumpled slightly. Satisfied? She asked. I smoothed out the letter and read it carefully. It was vague enough that she could probably try to use it against me later, but it would do for now. I'll clear the road first thing tomorrow morning. Why not tonight? Tom Henderson asked. Some of us need to get to work early. I checked my watch. It was almost 9. Because it's dark, I'm tired and the machine works better in daylight. I'll start at 7, which is within the legal time frame and now within HOA rules. You'll all be able to get out by 8. There were some grumbles, but most people seemed satisfied. The meeting broke up, and I headed home with my letter, feeling like I had won at least a small victory. Patricia had been forced to back down in front of everyone, and she clearly hated every second of it. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The next morning I was up at 6:30, coffee in hand, ready to clear the road as promised. I opened my garage and stopped dead. My snowblower was gone. I stared at the empty space where it should have been, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I looked around the garage, thinking maybe I had moved it for some reason and forgotten. But no, it was definitely gone. Someone had taken it. I walked back into the house and called the police. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would be out within an hour. While I waited, I went outside to look for evidence. The snow in front of my garage was trampled and messy, with what looked like drag marks leading toward the street. Whoever had taken it had apparently dragged or wheeled it away in the night. Officer Daniel Martinez arrived 45 minutes later, a young cop with a friendly face and a thick Wisconsin accent. He took my statement, photographed the drag marks, and asked questions about who might have wanted to steal a snowblower. It's a nice machine, he said, making notes. Worth what? $2,000. About $2,500, I said. But here's the thing. I had issues with my HOA yesterday about using it. The president wasn't happy that I stopped clearing the road and she had to back down in front of everyone at a meeting last night. Officer Martinez's eyebrows went up. You think your HOA president stole your snowblower? I think it's a hell of a coincidence that it disappeared the night after she was publicly embarrassed. He wrote something in his notebook. I'll need her contact information. We'll look into it. In the meantime, do you have the serial number for the machine? We'll put it in the system. I gave him all the information from my purchase receipt, and he promised to follow up. After he left, I called Michelle Harper, my attorney. She listened to the whole story and let out a low whistle. If Patricia took it, that's theft. Criminal theft, not HOA nonsense, but you'll need proof. I have security cameras, I said suddenly. I installed them last year after someone hit my mailbox. They face the driveway and the garage. Then check the footage and call the police back if you find anything. And Victor, don't confront Patricia yourself. Let the cops handle it. I pulled up my security camera app on my phone, my hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. The cameras were decent quality, with night vision capabilities. I scrolled back to the previous night, starting at midnight. For hours, nothing happened. Then at 3:17 in the morning, a figure appeared on screen. Even bundled up against the cold, I recognized Patricia's distinctive walk and the shape of her face when she glanced up at the street. She wasn't alone. Gerald, her husband, was with her. Together, they opened my garage using the emergency release cable that hung near the door, an old-style garage that didn't have great security. They unplugged my snowblower, and Gerald wheeled it out while Patricia kept watch. The camera clearly showed them loading it into the back of a pickup truck that I recognized as belonging to Patricia's son. I saved the footage, backed it up to 3 different locations, and called Officer Martinez back. He returned an hour later with another officer, and I showed them the video on my laptop. They watched it twice, their expressions growing more serious each time. "That's pretty clear-cut," Officer Martinez said. "That's definitely theft. We'll need to go have a conversation with Mrs. Pemberton." "Can I come?" I asked. "Absolutely not," the other officer said, a veteran named Officer Stevens with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "You stay here. We'll handle this." They left, and I spent the next 2 hours pacing my house and refreshing my phone every 30 seconds. Finally, Officer Martinez called. "We recovered your snowblower," he said. "It was in Mrs. Pemberton's garage covered with a tarp. She and her husband are both being charged with theft. Your machine is evidence for now, but you'll get it back after we process everything." "Did she admit it?" "She claimed she was holding it for safekeeping because she was concerned about further thefts in the neighborhood. But the video makes it pretty clear that's not what happened. She's been arrested, processed, and released on bail. She's pretty angry, so I'd advise you to keep your distance and maybe upgrade your garage security." After I hung up, I sat down heavily on my couch, trying to process everything. Patricia had actually stolen my snowblower. She had committed an actual crime because she couldn't handle being told no. It was insane. My phone started ringing almost immediately after word got out. Apparently, police cars in a small neighborhood attract attention. Paul Rodriguez called first, asking if I was okay and what had happened. I gave him the basic story, and he let out a long, low whistle. "She really stole your snowblower. That's completely unhinged. Apparently she thought she could get away with it." "What about the road?" Paul asked. "We're still snowed in." "I know. My snowblower is evidence right now. The police have it." "I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do until they release it." "This isn't your fault, man. This is all Patricia. I'll spread the word." Over the next few hours, I heard from almost everyone on Pinecone Drive. The reactions ranged from shock to anger to a sort of bewildered amusement. Tom Henderson told me that his wife had always thought Patricia was unbalanced, and this proved it. Susan Chen apologized for not standing up to Patricia sooner. Even Margaret Wilson called, sounding shaky and upset, to say that she was resigning from the HOA board effective immediately. The only person who didn't call was Patricia. The police released my snowblower 3 days later, after they had documented everything and taken statements. By that point, we had gotten another 8 inches of snow, and Pinecone Drive looked like an Arctic expedition route. I cleared my driveway, then spent 3 hours clearing the road. People came out of their houses to thank me, and Tom Henderson insisted on buying me dinner. Patricia's house remained dark and quiet. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and Gerald were staying with her mother in Milwaukee while they dealt with their legal issues. Their lawyer had apparently advised them to avoid the neighborhood to prevent any confrontations. The HOA held an emergency election 2 weeks later. Paul Rodriguez was elected as the new president by unanimous vote, with Susan Chen as secretary. Their first official act was to officially abolish the noise restriction and to draft a letter of apology to me on behalf of the association. Their second act was to establish a snow removal fund where each household contributed money to cover gas and maintenance for my snowblower. I tried to refuse, but Paul insisted. "You've been doing this for free for 2 years, he said. "The least we can do is cover your costs." Patricia's criminal case moved slowly through the system, which seemed to be standard for Wisconsin courts. Her lawyer tried to get the charges reduced or dismissed, arguing that it was a neighbor dispute that got out of hand, but the video evidence was too clear. The prosecutor offered a plea deal: plead guilty to misdemeanor theft, pay restitution, perform community service, and avoid any contact with me. Patricia took it. I attended the hearing where she entered her plea, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to see it through to the end. Patricia stood before the judge looking smaller somehow, diminished without her usual aggressive confidence. Her blonde hair had gone back to its natural gray at the roots, and she wore a simple black dress instead of her usual fleece vest uniform. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Karen Kowalski, and she did not look impressed with the situation. She reviewed the case file, watched portions of the security video, and then fixed Patricia with a stern look. "Mrs. Pemberton, I've been a judge for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of HOA disputes come through my courtroom. But I have never seen one escalate to this level over something as simple as snow removal. You stole your neighbor's property in the middle of the night because you didn't like that he followed the rules you created. Do you understand how serious that is?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly. "I'm accepting the plea agreement, but I want to be clear about something. If I see you in my courtroom again for anything involving harassment, theft, or abuse of authority, I will throw the book at you. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You're sentenced to 100 hours of community service to be performed with the Green Bay Parks Department. You will pay full restitution to Mr. Vaughn for any damages or costs associated with the theft. And you are prohibited from holding any leadership position in your homeowners association for a period of 5 years. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Kowalski signed the order and dismissed us. I left the courtroom without looking at Patricia, though I could feel her eyes on me as I walked past. Outside, the prosecutor, a young woman named Amanda Richardson, caught up with me. "That went as well as we could have hoped," she said. "The restitution covers your legal fees and the storage fees for the snowblower while it was in evidence. You should receive a check within 30 days. "I appreciate all your help," I said honestly, "just doing my job, but between you and me, I'm glad that video was so clear. People who abuse positions of authority drive me crazy, and HOA presidents are some of the worst offenders. At least this one is going to think twice before pulling something like this again." The story should have ended there. Patricia had been punished, the road was being cleared regularly, and the neighborhood had returned to something resembling normal. But of course, it wasn't quite that simple. About a month after the court hearing, I came home from grocery shopping to find a for sale sign in Patricia's yard. According to Paul, who had heard it from Margaret, who had heard it from someone else, Patricia and Gerald had decided to move. The shame of the criminal conviction combined with the hostility from the neighborhood had become too much. They were relocating to Florida, where apparently Patricia's sister lived. Part of me felt bad. I had never wanted to ruin anyone's life. I had just wanted to clear snow without being hassled about it. But another part of me, the part that remembered all the phone calls and stress and the violation of having my property stolen, didn't feel bad at all. Patricia had made her choices. She could live with the consequences. The house sold quickly, bought by a young couple from Chicago named Ryan and Emily, who were excited about Wisconsin winters and small-town living. They introduced themselves to me within a week of moving in, bringing homemade cookies and thanking me profusely for keeping the road clear. "We heard all about the drama from the previous owners," Emily said, laughing. "Well, not from them directly, but from everyone else in the neighborhood. It sounds like you handled it perfectly." "I just followed the rules," I said with a shrug. "Well, we appreciate it. And if the snowblower is ever too loud for us, we'll just wear earplugs." Winter gave way to spring, and with it came the inevitable HOA drama about lawn care and holiday decorations and all the other petty concerns that seemed to consume neighborhood associations. But Paul ran the meetings with a light touch, focusing on actual community issues like organizing a neighborhood garage sale and planning a summer barbecue. It was what an HOA should have been all along. I ran into Patricia one more time, purely by accident, at a hardware store in Green Bay about 6 months after everything had settled. She was in the paint aisle, examining color swatches, and she looked up just as I walked past. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I could see her deciding whether to say something, her mouth opening slightly. Then she seemed to think better of it, and she turned back to the paint samples without a word. I continued on my way, grabbing the furnace filters I had come for and checking out. As I loaded my purchases into my truck, I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering resentment. It was just over, a chapter of my life that had closed completely. The following winter was quieter. We got plenty of snow, as Wisconsin always does, but there were no complaints about my snowblower and no mysterious thefts. I cleared the road 3 or 4 times a week, depending on the snowfall, and life continued in its normal rhythm. Paul and his wife had me over for dinner regularly. The Hendersons invited me to their Super Bowl party. The Chens brought me homemade dumplings during Chinese New Year. It was the neighborhood dynamic I had hoped for when I first moved in. One Saturday morning in February, I was clearing the road after a particularly heavy overnight snow when Ryan, the new neighbor from Patricia's old house, came jogging up wearing running gear despite the cold. "Hey, Victor," he called out. "Got a second?" I killed the engine. "What's up?" "Emily and I were talking, and we want to buy you a backup snowblower. Nothing as fancy as yours, just something electric that could handle light snow. We figured if your main one ever breaks down or needs repairs, you'd have a backup so the road doesn't become impassable." I was genuinely touched. "That's really generous, but it's not necessary." "We want to," Ryan insisted. "Everyone on this street benefits from what you do. It's the least we can contribute. Plus, Emily's parents are visiting next month and her dad is super into power equipment. He'd probably want to help pick it out and then talk your ear off about it." I laughed. "All right, if you insist, but I'm splitting the cost with you. Deal." As I fired up the snowblower again and continued down the road, I found myself thinking about how much had changed in just 1 year. A petty dispute over noise had escalated into theft, criminal charges, and a complete transformation of neighborhood dynamics. Patricia had lost her position, her reputation, and eventually her home, all because she couldn't stand someone not following her arbitrary rules. But out of that conflict had come something better. The new HOA actually served the community instead of ruling over it. Neighbors looked out for each other instead of complaining to anonymous boards. And I had learned an important lesson about standing up for yourself, even when it would be easier to just comply with unreasonable demands. I finished clearing the road and put away the snowblower, already looking forward to the spring thaw. But I wasn't dreading next winter anymore. I had good neighbors, clear rules, and a machine that could handle whatever weather Wisconsin threw at us. Sometimes standing your ground is uncomfortable and messy, but it's worth it in the end. The legal aftermath dragged on for a while, as these things do. The restitution check arrived exactly as promised, covering my legal consultation fees and the inconvenience of being without my equipment. I used part of it to upgrade my garage security, installing a proper smart lock system and adding more security cameras. I wasn't paranoid, just practical. Patricia might be gone, but the experience had taught me that it's better to be prepared. Michelle Harper, my attorney, sent me a final letter closing out my case file. She included a note that said, "Thanks for the entertainment. Most of my work is boring document review. Your HOA drama was the highlight of my month. Call me if Patricia bothers you again, but I doubt she will." I appreciated her humor and her help. The community service component of Patricia's sentence became something of a legend in the neighborhood. Apparently, she was assigned to clean up litter in Green Bay parks, which meant she spent her weekends walking around with a trash picker and a garbage bag, wearing a bright orange vest that identified her as someone performing court-ordered service. Several people from Pinecone Drive claimed to have spotted her, though I never went looking. It seemed cruel to gawk at someone's punishment, even if they had brought it on themselves. What did surprise me was hearing from Margaret Wilson, the former HOA secretary, about 3 months after everything settled down. She stopped by my house one evening with a plate of brownies and an apology. "I should have spoken up," she said, standing awkwardly on my porch. I knew the noise complaints weren't real. Patricia told me she was irritated by your snowblower one morning when she had a headache, and I just went along with it when she decided to make it an official issue. I'm sorry. I was a coward. I accepted the brownies and invited her in for coffee. We talked for over an hour about HOA politics, about how easy it is to get swept up in someone else's agenda, and about the importance of thinking independently. Margaret was a decent person who had made a mistake, and I appreciated that she owned up to it. I resigned from the board because I realized I was just rubber stamping Patricia's decisions, she told me. I never wanted power or authority, I just wanted to help the neighborhood, but I let her turn me into an enabler. "You're doing better now," I pointed out. "You recognized the problem and changed course. That takes courage too." She smiled, looking relieved. "Paul is doing a much better job as president. Did you hear he organized that group for snow removal coordination? Now we have a phone tree so people can let each other know when they need help with heavy snow, and several people have volunteered to keep rock salt stocked at the entrance to the road." It was true. The neighborhood had become more cohesive after the Patricia drama, like we had all been freed from a toxic influence. The new systems were practical and cooperative rather than punitive and controlling. It made a huge difference. As spring arrived and the snow finally melted, revealing the brown grass and leftover debris of winter, the neighborhood turned its attention to other matters. There were gardens to plant, houses to paint, and all the usual maintenance that comes with homeownership. The HOA organized a neighborhood cleanup day, and almost everyone participated, filling dumpsters with branches, leaves, and winter's accumulated junk. I found myself actually enjoying the community events now. Without Patricia's rigid control and constant criticism, people relaxed and had fun. The summer barbecue that Paul organized turned into a monthly tradition, with different families volunteering to host. The Chens did an amazing Korean barbecue in June. The Rodriguez family threw a spectacular Mexican fiesta in July. Tom and Julie Henderson hosted a classic Wisconsin brats and beer cookout in August. When September rolled around, I realized I had lived in Greenfield Meadows for over 3 years. It was officially home, and I was happy there. The approaching winter didn't fill me with dread this time. I had my snowblower serviced and ready. I had backup equipment thanks to Ryan and Emily's generous gift, and I had a neighborhood full of people who appreciated what I did rather than complaining about how I did it. The first snow came in early November, just a dusting that didn't require any real clearing. But the second snow, a week before Thanksgiving, dropped 6 inches overnight. I was up at 6:30, coffee in hand, ready to start my routine. As I fired up the snowblower, I noticed Paul coming out of his house, also dressed for the cold. "What are you doing?" I called over the engine noise. "Helping," he shouted back. "I bought a snowblower last month. Nothing as fancy as yours, but it works. Figured we could tag team the road. I'll do the cul-de-sac end, you start from your end, and we'll meet in the middle." I grinned. "Sounds like a plan." We worked in companionable silence, the roar of our engines echoing through the early morning. We met in the middle about 40 minutes later, having cut our usual time in half. Other neighbors were emerging from their houses, waving thanks as they warmed up their cars for work. "We should coordinate this regularly," Paul said as we shut down our machines. "Trade off who does which section. Share the work." "I'm good with that." "Great." "I'll add it to the agenda for next week's HOA meeting." "Oh, and you're coming to that, right? We're voting on the budget for spring landscaping at the entrance." I realized with some surprise that I wanted to go. "Yeah, I'll be there." The HOA meeting was nothing like the tense, combative session from a year ago. We met in Paul's basement rec room, sitting on comfortable couches and drinking beer while we discussed neighborhood business. The budget passed unanimously. We agreed to hire a local landscaping company to plant native wildflowers at the entrance to Pinecone Drive. Susan Chen volunteered to organize a Christmas decoration contest, with prizes for creativity, rather than compliance with strict rules. It was what community governance should be: practical, cooperative, and focused on actually improving people's lives rather than controlling them. As I drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed because I had refused to back down over one simple issue. If I had just accepted Patricia's noise restriction and found some other way to clear the road, or stopped clearing it and let everyone struggle, the neighborhood might still be under her thumb. But by standing firm, by forcing the issue until her overreach became obvious to everyone, I had helped break her control. The irony wasn't lost on me that Patricia's downfall had come from her own actions, not mine. I hadn't reported her to any authorities or campaigned against her. I had simply stopped doing something I wasn't required to do, and when she responded by committing a crime, she had sealed her own fate. It was a lesson in how bullies eventually destroy themselves if you don't give them the satisfaction of submission. Winter progressed normally, with the usual Wisconsin mix of heavy snow, brutal cold, and occasional warm spells that turned everything to slush. Paul and I maintained our tag team snow clearing system, and on really big storms, Tom Henderson joined us with his older but functional snowblower. It became a sort of bonding ritual, the three of us working together in the early morning darkness, then gathering for coffee and conversation afterward. I learned that Tom had been an engineer before retirement, and we spent hours discussing projects and designs. Paul worked in insurance but loved cooking, and he was always experimenting with new recipes that he'd bring over to share. These were real friendships, built on mutual respect and shared effort, not the superficial politeness that had masked the dysfunctional dynamics under Patricia's reign. In February, I ran into Officer Martinez at the grocery store. He recognized me immediately and came over to chat. "Hey, Victor, how's the snowblower situation?" "Good. No more thefts and the HOA is actually functional now," he laughed. "Glad to hear it." That was one of the weirder cases I've worked. Usually, HOA disputes just involve angry letters and small claims court. Criminal theft was a new one. Whatever happened with Patricia? Is she done with community service? Finished it last month, actually. She's been living in Florida with her sister from what I understand. Doubt she'll be back in Wisconsin anytime soon. Too cold for her now, apparently." He grinned at his own joke. We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing in particular, then went our separate ways. It was a pleasant reminder that the drama was truly over, relegated to the past where it belonged. Spring came again, my fourth in the neighborhood, and with it came new beginnings. Ryan and Emily announced they were expecting their first child. The Chen's daughter got accepted to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Paul's wife was promoted to head nurse at the hospital. Life continued its forward momentum, full of the normal joys and challenges that have nothing to do with property disputes or HOA politics. The annual HOA meeting in May was surprisingly well attended. Paul presented a report showing that our neighborhood satisfaction scores, measured by an informal survey, had increased dramatically over the past year. Participation in community events was up. Complaints were down. Property values had even increased slightly, though that was probably more about the general market than anything we had done. "I think we're proving that an HOA can actually add value instead of just adding stress," Paul said. "We're here to help each other, not to enforce arbitrary rules for the sake of having rules. And I want to especially thank Victor for dealing with all the snow removal drama last year with patience and principle. You set the tone for how we should handle disagreements, with clear communication, respect for everyone's rights, and a willingness to stand firm when something is truly wrong." Everyone applauded, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I hadn't done anything special, just refused to be pushed around, but I appreciated the recognition. After the meeting, Emily pulled me aside. "We want to ask you something," she said. "Ryan and I are looking for someone to be our baby's godfather, someone who embodies the kind of integrity and community spirit we want to teach our child. Would you consider it?" I was stunned. "I'm honored, but are you sure? We've only known each other for about a year." "Sometimes you know someone's character pretty quickly," Ryan said, joining us. "You handled a difficult situation with grace and principle. You helped the whole neighborhood without expecting anything in return. You're exactly the kind of person we want in our child's life. So yes, we're sure." I accepted, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the spring weather. This was what community really meant. People choosing to be in each other's lives, supporting each other, building something lasting and meaningful. The summer was peaceful and productive. I took on some freelance engineering projects, made improvements to my house, and enjoyed the warm weather after the long winter. The neighborhood barbecues continued, each one feeling more relaxed and genuine than the last. We were becoming more than just people who happened to live on the same street. We were becoming friends. In late August, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Patricia, postmarked from Sarasota, Florida. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten on plain paper, and the message was surprisingly direct. "Victor, I've spent the last year in therapy trying to understand why I acted the way I did. My therapist thinks I had control issues stemming from other parts of my life, and being HOA president gave me an outlet for those impulses. That doesn't excuse what I did. Stealing your snowblower was wrong, criminal, and stupid. Trying to control how you helped the neighborhood was petty and counterproductive. I'm writing this not because I expect forgiveness, but because my therapist says taking accountability is part of moving forward. You were right to stand up to me. I wish I had been self-aware enough to back down gracefully instead of escalating. I hope the neighborhood is doing well. I hear Paul is doing a good job. Take care, Patricia." I read the letter twice, then filed it away in my desk drawer. It didn't change anything, but it did provide a sense of closure. Patricia had recognized her mistakes and was working on herself. That was more than a lot of people would do. As autumn arrived and the leaves began to turn, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since I moved to Greenfield Meadows. I had come here looking for a quiet place to live and work, and instead I had found community, friendship, and a lesson in the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable. The first snow of my fourth winter arrived in late October, earlier than usual. I was ready for it, and so was the rest of the neighborhood. Paul and I cleared the road together, working efficiently in the pre-dawn darkness. Tom joined us halfway through, and we finished the entire street in under an hour. Afterward, we gathered in my kitchen for coffee and the breakfast sandwiches that had become our tradition. We talked about work, families, plans for the holidays, and the upcoming Packers game. We were just three guys who happened to be neighbors, helping each other out because that's what neighbors do. Looking out my kitchen window at the snow-covered street, the clean path we had cleared running like a ribbon through the white, I felt deeply content. This was home. Not just the house, but the community, the relationships, the sense of belonging and mutual support. It had taken a conflict to get here, a battle over something as simple as a snowblower, but we had come through it stronger and more connected. The road ahead, both literally and figuratively, was clear, and whatever challenges winter might bring, I knew we would face them together, as neighbors should. The HOA that had once been a source of tyranny and stress had been transformed into something useful and good, a framework for cooperation rather than control. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it seems easier to just give in. Sometimes standing your ground means accepting conflict and consequences. But when you come through it with your principles intact and your community improved, it's worth every difficult moment. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to the view outside, to the neighborhood we had built together, to the simple act of clearing snow becoming something more meaningful. Then I turned back to my friends and our conversation, grateful for where I had ended up and how we had gotten here. The snowblower sat in my garage, ready for the next storm, a reminder of battles fought and won, of communities transformed, and of the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept unreasonable demands and trust that standing firm will lead to something better. It had for me. It had for all of us on Pinecone Drive, and that was enough.